Hello and welcome to the Labor Jawn podcast, where we venture deep into the working class history of Philadelphia. Oh, geez, that's going to come up. Hold on, let me try that again. I hit my chair. Hello and welcome to the Labor Jawn podcast, where we venture deep into the working class history of Philadelphia and the surrounding world, both past and present. My name is Sam James. I'm a co-host, and the other co-host of the co-host is...
I'm Gabe Christie, and as you can tell, we're professionals.
Well, I'm going to edit out the part that I messed up in the beginning, Gabe, so nobody will get that joke.
That's fair.
Except Lindsey and Duncan.
Yeah, so we have some lovely guests with us here tonight. So if you would like to introduce yourselves, you can...
Hi, my name is Lindsey Farrell. I am currently located in Point Breeze. Been in Philadelphia all my life. I'm a member of NOLSW, UAW 2320.
What was the acronym prior to the UAW?
Yeah, so it's the National Organization of Legal Service Workers. We're UAW's only amalgamated union.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Okay. And Duncan, if you can introduce yourself real quick.
Yeah, hey everyone, my name's Duncan. I'm originally from Ohio, but I've lived in Philly for, I guess, 7 years now in South Philly. I've two jobs. I am a teacher, so I'm a member of PFT, and I also, I think most relevant to this, I work at the Phillies ballpark, where I'm a member of Unite Here 274.
Roger that. And with that in mind, I guess I should also probably introduce the topic of conversation, because I haven't done that yet.
They'll figure it out.
Yeah. Context clues. But we're here to talk about the proposed 76ers arena in Chinatown in Philly and the labor issues surrounding it. So I guess let's start with the basics. For anyone not from Philly, what is Philadelphia's Chinatown, roughly?
So Philly's Chinatown started in the late 1800s, early 1900s. There was the first influx of Chinese migrants came in and built a flourishing area around 9th and Race. The area was mostly made up of like lodgings, laundries, restaurants, churches, just kind of an area for immigrants to be in community with each other. That kind of became the gathering point and kind of first version of Philadelphia's Chinatown. In its first couple of decades as well, Chinatown was predominantly inhabited by mostly men without their families because of the Page Act that was in 1875. Essentially, they just wanted Chinese men to be laborers, and a lot of their families and the moms stayed in China and were in China. The legislation banned Chinese women from immigrating to the U.S. essentially. And then a few years later, the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act banned entry for men as well. But before all of these restrictive kind of immigration laws came about, the community was formed essentially. And the Chinese community was mainly composed of male workers trying to escape racism and violence and just kind of like be with each other. And a lot of them also came from the West. So thinking like Gold Rush, California, a lot of them came east as well to try and find refuge. So that's kind of how Chinatown started. It's been around for 150 years now at this point. I think a little bit over. Math is hard. But yeah, it established right at 9th and Race, kind of still the heart of Chinatown today. And the community has been fighting everything from expansion of highways to prisons to casinos, stadiums. It's also the only community of not only community of color in Philly, but I would say it's a pretty significant cultural community of color in the city. Whereas it is, there's the Arch. There's a lot of history tied to the streets of 9th and Race.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I think it's one of the only ones that has stayed consistently within the same community for almost its entire existence, because every other community tends to have lots of migration in and out, but Chinatown has really stayed Chinatown.
Yeah, I was doing some reading before this, and I learned that It's actually one of the few remaining Chinatowns left in the United States. Some part due to, I think, a lot of people moving around, like you mentioned, a lot of Chinatowns kind of having to shrink or relocate due to just gentrification. And I think that's also a testament to just like the endurance this community has and like is continuing to fight and like keep up the stamina, because it's pretty, I think, pretty cool to say that Philly has one of the most significant Chinatowns in the country.
Yeah, definitely. And it's definitely not what most people think of when they think of Philly, but everyone I know of who's actually lived in the city absolutely at least loves visiting all the restaurants there. So, but speaking of gentrification, let's dive into why we're here today. So, rumor has it that there's some people trying to build some kind of an arena in kind of in the middle of Chinatown.
Yeah, it's bad. Unfortunately, that is true. So legislation was like officially introduced, I believe, a little over a month ago, October 4th. Councilman Mark Squilla introduced it, and they're trying to let this arena passed by the end of this year. In some part due to Mayor Parker's administration, and some part due to timelines that the 76ers are trying to just force. They're kind of arbitrary. Billionaires can do whatever they want with their money.
Yeah, of course.
So, but yeah, Chinatown has a long history of fighting back against gentrification. Some successes and wins for sure, and others, obviously, some failures. The expansion of the Vine Street Expressway is probably the most significant, just splitting the entire community in half. Not necessarily in half, but yeah, we're here to talk about the 76ers Arena, which bad deal for Philly.
And just for context for any of our listeners who haven't been tracking this, the Sixers Arena is currently down in the larger sports complex in South Philly, and I believe they share it with the Flyers.
Yeah.
But the billionaire owners of the 76ers have been looking to relocate.
They don't want to pay rent.
Yeah, basically. And want to redevelop Market East, which is kind of right at the entrance to Chinatown in Philly. But any construction of this size is going to have lasting impact on all of the surrounding neighborhoods as well. So what has the community's response been to both the like initial proposals, and then obviously it's ramped up in the past couple of weeks with the legislation actually getting passed through the city council?
So the community's response has been to fight like hell.
There you go.
That's honestly what my observations have been, and also just participating and being part of the community has been really, I think, rewarding for me as like a human and organizer, and also really aggravating because this is still continuing to happen. But I also feel very fortunate that we have a lot of elders that have been around the block and know what they're doing, and have successfully fought off the casino and the other stadium. And so I feel fortunate that they are also at the head of this movement, leading us, and like it feels like some things may be going well. Especially given the last couple of hearings that have happened, it seems like City Council is also starting to see through some of the proposed legislation. But I think the community's response has been and will continue to be to fight like hell. We know how to organize. We've done it before, and we're going to continue to do it. And I also think that this, just the past election really highlighted for a lot of people in the community how much we need each other, and we need to, like, we can't necessarily rely on Democrats or Republicans to fight for us. We need to have each other's backs. And I also think a lot about like the labor intersection there, obviously, too, of just like solidarity goes so much further than just showing up and like protecting my coworker or like being there. Like I need to be with my community as well. And it's been great and wonderful to see how much people are willing to show up for each other. As like I've just met so many amazing people over the past year and a half of this fight, and I know that like I've made some lifelong friends from it as well.
That's awesome.
But I wanted to dive a little bit more into the labor side of everything here, because it has been a like very commonly thrown around talking point that broadly unions in the city are supporting the arena. Obviously, that's not the entire story because we're here to talk to you about labor. So can you highlight some of the labor issues that are coming up with the arena, both with Duncan, if you can talk about Unite Here, and then Lindsey, if you want to talk about any of the other unions involved.
So I work at the Philly Stadium. I work at Tony Luke's that makes cheesesteaks there. So I don't work at Wells Fargo, which is the basketball and hockey stadium that would move to Center City. But I would be directly affected, and a lot of my coworkers would be affected by the move. I think it would be terrible for us, and like you said, like the framing around the arena in Center City has been that it's like supported by workers, supported by unions, and I think it might create temporary jobs around construction, but the permanent workers who serve people at the arena would be really badly impacted. I think it'd be bad for us in a lot of reasons. I don't know. I can like kind of explain those, but I'm just like overall pretty upset that the building the arena has been framed as a pro worker thing when I think it would be bad for the permanent workers who work every day in the stadiums.
Yeah, if you don't mind going into that a little bit deeper, just to give folks a better sense of both what issues you're facing now with, I mean, even with the recent strike, and then what you foresee with this new arena.
Yeah, sure. So I feel like there are a couple things that we'd be impacted by. Like, first of all, if you're starting a new arena, starting a new business, like opening a new thing, that's going to be a new bargaining unit. And so any new workers would have to be organized into a union. At Wells Fargo, we're already organized. We're already in a union. So I think that whatever kind of like promises the Sixers might make about unionization, like we would have to organize a new union. Workers would be unorganized until we do that. So I think that's a huge issue. And then I also just think like, so for those that don't know, like a lot of people like in the South Philly sports complex, right? There's the link where the football stadium is, Wells Fargo, which is basketball and hockey, and then CBP, where I work at the ballpark, the Phillies. And so what we've been fighting for a lot in the last year, like people work at all those three different arenas, those three stadiums. And what we've been fighting for is to kind of make that into a full-time job. And we've done a lot to make progress to that. Like now, all of the hours that you work count towards your overtime or count towards your health care across those three stadiums. And opening up 76ers Place in Center City would mean, I think that basically would turn jobs that we've made to become nearly full-time sustainable jobs, that would turn those full-time jobs into part-time jobs. Like new people would be applying to the arena in Center City. I'm not sure, but I think it'd be really hard to work like in South Philly and also in Center City. So basically, yeah, you're talking about taking full-time jobs where we've started to have a standardized contract and splitting them up into part-time jobs. So for a lot of reasons for me, it's like, yeah, I'm upset that it's become like the framing in the city has become that the arena is the pro-labor position, but I think, I don't agree with that, obviously.
And I can't imagine that the 76ers or Airmark would be, at all resistant to a new union forming. I can't imagine that they'd put up any barriers there.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, there's talk in the community benefits agreement of a labor peace agreement or like labor neutrality agreement, which would make it easier to unionize in your workplace. But I'll say that I used to work at the airport in Philly, which has a labor peace agreement. Myself and other coworkers organized the union at the airport, and despite a labor neutrality agreement, our union was decertified. So like, no, I kind of just like, no matter what promises the Sixers might make about being friendly towards unions, I just don't believe it. I've seen those kind of agreements been broken, and I don't think there's enforcement of them.
I think some of it too is that the construction of the arena itself is thought of to be as like building trade unions in particular and construction unions in particular want those jobs, which makes sense. Obviously, of course, you want your workers to have work and you want them to be able to make a living. But I think when it gets down to it, a lot of what Duncan is saying rings true. Is there isn't really any guarantee that these jobs would actually go to organized labor. As far as I'm aware, it's very possible that the Parker administration has had brokered a deal with a union. I'm not aware, but I think part of why it's also being framed as a pro-labor thing is, I think a lot about some of the people that also at the hearings that testify. They were like, just like put me to work. I'm ready to work. I want to work, which makes a lot of sense. But they're also neglecting the fact that this entire movement and like Chinatown, we're not against an arena. We're against an arena in this particular location. And these jobs could happen, the building trades jobs that they want could happen if it was constructed in South Philly as part of the complex that already exists. It's not like we're saying disappear these jobs and make them go away. I would, I can be the first to say that most of the Chinatown folks that I've interacted with are very pro-labor. A lot of them come from immigrant families that had good union jobs, and that's why they were able to succeed in like how they were. And I think just the really dangerous framing here is that we're essentially also pitting communities against each other. A lot of the building trades unions in the city represent primarily Black and brown workers. And Chinatown obviously is a community of color. And I think it's also just another way that a wedge is being divided here, instead of understanding that this is just a bad deal in general and we can just pick it up, move it somewhere else. And great, Chinatown just doesn't want the gentrification. We don't need it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think at least judging by everything to come out of AFSCME over the past year, trusting the Parker administration to have labor might not be the best approach.
Friend of the show, Bear Parker?
Yeah.
She's our next guest, Gabe.
Oh God, you're going to get us in a lot of trouble now. So there are, like you said, there have been a couple other locations proposed. Either just build a new stadium where it already is down in South Philly. I know they've also proposed Camden, which is trying to rebuild its waterfront right now.
Hey, there you go.
But so now, if you wanted to take the labor side as well, Lindsey, and what organizing on, or has there been any organizing you've been doing within your UAW local, or if you want to expand on that at all?
Yeah, totally. So my UAW local, I technically work for a national nonprofit. So I have a lot of coworkers just like across the country, so they're not super tapped in. But I will say that over the past couple of weeks, there's been a petition that's been floating around that's essentially like labor activists and union members that are opposed to the arena. And we've actually started to, we created a group called Labor Opposed to Unjust Development, or LOUD is kind of like the acronym.
I love it. I love it.
And we only met once, but there a lot of that has to do with the fact that a lot of folks are AFSCME members, and there's obviously a lot going on there at the moment. But we have been organizing to try and just push the narrative a little bit more that not everyone that is a part of the organized labor movement in the city is in support of the construction of this arena. And I think there's been something really like powerful for me, at least, as I've kind of started to have one-on-one conversations with folks and starting to build a little bit more of a bridge, because like I mentioned, my union is kind of like scattered all over the place. I've been able to connect a little bit more with folks in the city, and I'm just hearing everything from what Duncan shared to everything what I shared earlier about the fact that like this just obviously isn't a good deal for the city or for organized labor. There are so many other things that city council and the mayor need to be prioritizing right now. Thankfully, SEPTA, I think it was today or yesterday, SEPTA was like, we're not going to go on strike, but they had authorized a strike. SEPTA is also in like a death spiral or whatever that phrase was that they were floating about. There are so many other priorities that need to be taken care of. And I also know that I've talked to some AFSCME folks that are really pissed off that the Parker administration won't come to the table with a good deal, but they're trying to push this arena and they're trying to get this through. And it is kind of like motivating and lighting their fire a little bit more of just like, really, like, this is where you're going to spend your time at the moment. We need to be negotiating and trying to get like a better contract, and you're going to keep trying to push this agenda because billionaires are lining your pockets. And so I don't want to like, I'm not obviously speaking for AFSCME, but I just will share that like that is also some of the sentiment I've gathered from some of the members I've talked to over the past couple of weeks.
If I could, sorry, if I can jump into like another labor perspective is like, besides working in the arena, I'm also a teacher. I teach in a K-8 middle school in South Philly. We have a really diverse population with a lot of Asian American students. And whenever we ask kids about what they're doing over the weekend, like a lot of them will say, I'm going to Chinatown, I'm going to get a boba tea, like it's a huge social place for students. And that's, yeah, like, okay, our teachers union, I don't think will have a official position on this arena. But as a teacher, yeah, I'm really worried about losing that cultural space for Asian American students, especially, and how they'll be affected by the arena.
Yeah, definitely. And as we're talking about in the beginning, it's a major cultural piece in the center of the city that could very easily be threatened by this, or is being threatened by this, could very easily be destroyed by it.
I don't think we're thinking enough about the billionaires, though, Gabe. We gotta
That's
think about
true.
these guys a little more.
Someone needs to take their position into account, clearly. So I guess, how can folks help? And what are your plans for the future, without obviously overplaying your hand too much? If there's anything you want to keep under your hats, but like going forward, how can folks get involved? How can folks help support the community and get the, I guess, the alternative labor view or labor perspective out there, since basically every major news source in the city starts every article with like, all unions support this.
Yeah. So like I mentioned, they're trying to pass legislation by the end of the year. I don't know if that'll actually happen. We'll see if that actually happens. But I think it's important that people continue to lobby city council as much as they can. I can, Gabe and Sam, or one of you, I can send you all of the kind of asks we have at the moment in an email. But we have, I think the most important thing is honestly calling city council, letting them know that you're opposed to the arena, and calling every day and being consistent with it. Because they're hearing us. Like, it's clear they're hearing us. I don't know if you all have seen any of the videos or like TikToks or Instagrams or even the Inquirer articles where it's clear city council is starting to be a little skeptical of this plan and starting to see the holes. And I think continuing to keep that pressure up is really important. The other thing too is there are hearings that are coming up. I'll also send you over the schedule of hearings. If you're able to put this in like the show description, if it comes out before then, that'd be great. Getting people to show up to the hearings and testify about why they are opposed to the arena. And if anyone out here listening is a union member in the city of Philadelphia, follow us on Instagram, Labor Opposed to Unjust Development. I believe it's at Labor Against Arena on Instagram, and send us a DM, and we'd be happy to get you plugged into some of the other stuff that we're working on. But I think at the moment, our hope is to just continue to push the narrative that, hey, this is not only a bad deal for the city, but it's a bad deal for organized labor as well. We really didn't even get into like some of the tax stuff too, but like there are just so many other kind of labor intersections here that I think are just not even being like talked about. Honestly, like so many people are just like, I'm hearing just discourse amongst people of just like, oh, it'd be great to have the arena in Center City. And it's like, cool, but like, what about all the tax cuts? Like, what about all the tax breaks we're giving these billionaires? Like, come
And
on
these are
now.
people living in Bryn Mawr or something, you know? They're not in the
Yeah,
city
like,
where it actually affects them every single day of their lives.
yeah, like please
I don't mean to
like,
pick on Bryn Mawr, but
I mean, but like touch grass and like come to Center City
touch
and
concrete. Yeah.
touch concrete, touch the dirty, smelly, stinky Philadelphia concrete,
That
and
we love.
You'll understand and see. Especially touch the concrete right around Chinatown, and you'll understand and you'll see that the arena is just not needed in that specific area.
And when you do that, take SEPTA into the city. Don't drive in.
Yes.
There you go.
An even better perspective, because that was one thing I had forgotten earlier. That I think you had mentioned this briefly, Lindsey. That the most recent testimony from SEPTA's leadership was that while the arena agreement will pay for upgrades to Market East, SEPTA just doesn't have the funds to actually manage the increased ridership that would be expected. So in a system where we're already dealing with regular outages, constantly packed trains, but I mean, it is effectively in a death spiral if Harrisburg doesn't decide to actually amount of money.
And we're looking at it costing SEPTA about $25 million a year just to sustain the amount of rides that they would need to run to just this arena alone, not to mention all of the other SEPTA services that happen outside of Center City.
Mm-hmm.
And where who is that money going to come from? I know as hell it's not like the owners of the Sixers.
Yeah.
David Edelman and Josh Harris. Yeah. They don't want to pay that money.
No. Yeah. And for all of the flowery language about helping the community, they wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't going to be good for their bottom line. So,
yeah, right.
The other thing too that I think was interesting that I forget, I think it was Councilwoman Richardson had asked one of the Sixers, like, what percentage of equity holders are women, minorities, people of color? And they were like 0. And she was like, okay, and after this construction is built, or like let's say the arena gets built, what percentage are good of these your equity holders are going to be women, minority, people of color, or like people of like marginalized identities. I don't want to misquote her, but it was an interesting thing to hear them also say zero. And so that also makes me think like they clearly don't care about Chinatown or the other communities they're
No.
displacing. Look at who is represented on their board and who has a stake in this. It's not women, it's not like people of color, low like marginalized communities. It is rich billionaires that are going to rob Philadelphians of $400 million in tax revenue. That should honestly go to schools like Duncan's and should go to schools like all over the city and other services too. I mean, God, the housing crisis, the fact that I like the park right next door to me has trash all of the time everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are other important things that the city needs to deal with. This should not be a priority.
Yeah, but the 76ers might win a championship in the next century.
That's the other thing. Is like
They're
So-
terrible. They're terrible right now, by the way.
I think that's been my favorite, like, consistent comment on any post about this is
Yeah.
Sixers suck to, or the Sixers need to do better before they deserve an arena.
Yeah, they don't deserve it.
Not to be anti-worker and shit on the NBA but yeah,
It's fair. It's fair, Gabe.
yeah.
This time it's fair.
If you guys want to, or I don't have any further questions. I don't know if you do, Sam.
No questions. I just thank you for what you're doing. I mean,
Yeah.
The thing is, like, sorry, go ahead, Duncan.
I was just going to say, like Lindsey's call to action, like calling city council, especially if listeners are union members. Like, I think that calling your city council member can be really impactful, because the whole narrative around this arena is that it's pro worker thing, and so that like I explained, like I think it's bad for the workers at the stadiums. And so any union member that's listening, like if you can represent yourself as a union member against the arena to your at-large, to your district city council member, to at-large city council members, like I think that'd be really impactful, because I hate it. It pisses me off that this has become like a pro worker, pro labor position, because it would, like I explained, it'd be terrible for my union, for my coworkers.
And just like Lindsey was saying, that they're trying to pit different communities against each other, I think they're probably trying to pit all the unions against each other as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I am imagining maybe some type of turf wars may happen if this does happen. A bunch of unions are obviously going to want to go in, as they should, and organize the place. And then it also just becomes a question of like, I don't know, it's hard and complicated. Obviously, everyone deserves work. And obviously, I want people to have like healthcare and do what they need to do to live. But not at the expense of other communities, not at the expense of pitting Philadelphians against each other. Like, the people of Chinatown and the workers that would get these construction jobs probably have more in common with each other than they do with Josh Harris or like any of those billionaires. And they're just not able, I think like some people just aren't able to see that because they're like, I need this job, or like, I need work. And I think also a lot about the fact that like, I don't know, growing up and just kind of as I've evolved politically, I've learned that like union people need to be collectivists and care for each other and be with each other. And anyone that goes against that and kind of puts their own self-interest above the betterment of a community or the betterment of like, who puts their own self-interest above the betterment of a community is honestly like short-sighted, I would say. And that's just like not politically where I'm at. Not that you asked, but
We asked, don't worry.
Yeah.
I've met people who approve of a stadium being built. I have not met anybody in person who approve of a stadium being built that hinges on it being in Chinatown. Build it somewhere else and they can still be union jobs. There we go. It's solved.
Their whole thing is like, it's going to revitalize Center City.
Yeah, well.
And it's like, well, what have all those other projects done? Like the convention center, I think, was like, it's going to bring tourists back and be like this huge thing. No, the convention
Revitalize
center
our schools. How about that? We'll start with that one first.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much for speaking with us tonight. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, I'm just going to pull up the handle. Hold on. So it's on Instagram. We're at Labor Against Arena. Labor opposed to unjust development. If you're a union member in the city, please call city council daily. Please reach out over Instagram if you want to get plugged in. Make sure to sign our petition. And if you can show up to the hearings, please do testify as a union member. That's also really important. And just hope and pray that this thing doesn't get passed by the end of this year.
Fight like hell, right?
Yeah.
There we go.
Exactly. Oh my God. Never mind. I've been ranting too much. I was just going to also say there have been just the hospital perspective as well as something that I just wanted to offer of just like so many doctors and nurses and like the doctors and nurses union, like our union members are against the arena because of the insane traffic that already exists down there. Mm-hmm. Like Jefferson is a level 1 trauma center. How are they going to be helping people and caring for people when there is traffic on game night and an ambulance? It takes an ambulance, I think, like 4 or 5 minutes just to get like from Chinatown to Jefferson, like their ER. And it's only like 4 or 5 blocks, and it takes them, I think, like 10 minutes already. So like, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Like
we just want people to die, apparently.
Yeah.
And Duncan, I'm sure you can speak to the gridlock in the stadium section now, and that's with like very wide streets and ample parking lots to get people in and out. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know, for people who don't know Philly, like obviously the South Philly like traffic situation is totally different than being in Center City. Having games in South Philly causes a gridlock, but like putting it in Center City where there's already a lot of gridlock, yeah, it'd be insane. And so the hospital there is like that makes me really nervous. Like, what happens if there's a lot of gridlock around there and ambulances getting out? That just feels like totally untenable to me. I'm not a medical professional there, but yeah, they like Lindsey said, they've already said how that would affect them. That feels really bad.
Yeah, I actually don't know. They did a timing between the blocks and the trauma center. I don't actually know if the numbers I said were correct, but the point remains the same, that it's going to be gridlock no matter what. Like, it's already gridlock now. And it's only going to get worse with 40,000 at minimum people coming to the stadium. So, yeah, the point remains the same. I just wanted to bring that up because my mom is a nurse. And like, I've talked to her about it too. And it's just like, it's wild that people quite literally don't matter if you have billions of dollars. You can do whatever you want.
I feel like that's the general theme of this podcast, is just exploring that concept.
And then being incredibly depressed afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
but we fight like hell though, Gabe. That's what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, and that's the other side of it, is documenting all of the people resisting that reality. Before we go down another even more depressing side of this, thank you again, both of you, for talking with us tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure. And we will, everyone listening, go check out Labor Against Arena. on Instagram and get involved and make a fuss. Because if everyone is loud enough, then city council will hopefully eventually listen to the people they supposedly represent.